Gaddafi's regime and what he's doing, but maybe a symbolic gesture from a mission to the United States saying this isn't correct for the United Nations to take this kind of action against Libya. But obviously we'll have to wait to see exactly what those missions say when they speak in front of the General Assembly.
Anything else in train at the UN regarding Libya?
That's it for right now. Now, we know that, the rhetoric has kind of heated up, specifically when it comes to a possible no-fly zone, that coming out of the United States. If they would seek United Nations approval of that, that would have to go back to the Security Council, and that's not going to be as easy to pass a resolution that it incorporates any kind of military action, specifically a no-fly zone, if that comes back to the Security Council. We saw a pretty quick resolution passed over the weekend on Saturday. If they're going to try and the Security Council is going to try to get another resolution through with tougher sanctions or possible military action, that's going to be much more of a fight than we saw over the last week or so. But right now, it's not in the books. Right now, the only thing Libya-related in the entire United Nations here at the headquarters is this resolution by the General Assembly being entertained in moments.
Scott, I know you'll keep an eye on events and come back to us just as soon as we get anything concrete out of the UN. Thank you for now. We're talking about a no-fly zone. America's NATO allies have been discussing that and other possible forms of military intervention. Some countries are already deploying their forces in that area. Alan Fisher reports.
The faint aircraft noise, the smoke, the shouts. The Libyan Air Force apparently in action against its own people in the east of the country. This is what the UK, the US and others are trying to stop. While the politicians plan the military moves, US ships are being ordered into the area, planes are being put in place. UK Prime Minister David Cameron says nothing is being ruled out against Colonel Gaddafi.
It is not acceptable to have a situation where Colonel Gaddafi can be murdering his own people, using aeroplanes and helicopter gunships and the like, and we have to plan now to make sure if that happens we can do something to stop it.
The top option, a no-fly zone, fighter jets on patrol targeting Libyan aircraft ordered to attack protesters. Plan B, arming anti-government groups. Military assets, ships, planes, people are already on the move. The US has an aircraft carrier, the USS Enterprise in the Red Sea. Near Naples is the HQ of the US 6th Fleet. 8 ships are there right now. The US also has an airbase at Aviano in Italy and a naval base at Rota in Spain. The British are further out, an airbase in Cyprus and a naval base in Gibraltar. And the French have a vast airbase at Istres.
There is very little that the international community can do at present. Very little. What it can simply do is seek to offer humanitarian support and get workers out of Libya. But what it can't do is get embroiled in what can end up being an open-ended civil war.
Britain and its NATO allies are looking at what it can do next to help the people of Libya. Obviously, there's a feeling that if they wait, then the situation might resolve itself. We could be in the final days of the Gaddafi regime. But if he hangs on, then they're going to have to do something, and difficult decisions will have to be made. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, London.
We've been hearing from Robert Gates, he's the US Defense Secretary, apparently regarding the UN resolution, the one passed by the Security Council. He says that there's nothing in that resolution that would authorize military action, and he says NATO is split over the issue. Also hearing from Mr. Gates a little earlier on that with regard to US Navy vessels in and around the North African coast, he says those ships could help at the moment, he says, with evacuation and with humanitarian relief. But also, he says, sending hundreds of Marines, 2 amphibious ships, he says, to the Mediterranean. Now, the problems with those people trying to get out of Libya is that it's creating a growing refugee crisis. Hundreds of thousands now trying to get away from the trouble in Libya. Here's Charles Stratford.
Hungry and exhausted, arms outstretched, they clamour to catch loaves of bread. Tunisia's civil defence are in charge here. They throw food to thousands of men desperate to cross the border from Libya. Jamal Hassan is one of many Egyptians here who have fled the violence.
I am fed up. We won't go home. What's going on? There is no government, no justice. There is nothing here. I'm very sick and my legs are in pain. I want to go home.
As more and more people push to cross into Tunisia, so the casualties rise. Collapsed through exhaustion, this man is rushed by stretcher bearers to the side of the crowd. He's too traumatized to speak. Tunisian authorities say they are struggling to cope.
The problem is we're trying to process as many evacuees as possible in the shortest time and to treat them as fast as possible because their condition is getting worse.
Some of these people have arrived here injured. They are treated in ambulances and a makeshift hospital, victims of the violence unleashed on them by Gaddafi loyalists and mercenaries.
I don't need any money from Egypt. I just want to go back home. There are 26 of us from one street in Cairo, and we want to go home. We cannot wait in this ridiculous situation. It's inhuman. The Egyptian people are going to die. I swear they will die.
This is a Red Crescent hospital camp. A United Nations High Commission for Refugees camp has been expanded once already, providing beds for 10,000 people. But the organisation says it may need at least double that number, and the coordination effort must be better organised.
Well, I mean, this is what the civil defence people have decided to do, just out of the goodness of their heart. I don't think it will change anything, frankly, unless there's an organised... I mean, there's only two ways. Either you go in there and try to organise it, or expand your transit facility and draw them in.
The World Food Programme says at least $38 million is needed to fund the relief operation here. But with no end in sight to the violence and fears of a counter-offensive by Gaddafi's forces, a humanitarian crisis is now unfolding fast. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera.
You may remember I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago that Robert Gates, US Defense Secretary, was saying that America is sending some amphibious vessels to the coast of North Africa, possibly to help with the delivery of humanitarian aid, also possibly to help with evacuation of any people who need to get out of the country. Well, we now hear from Egypt that two amphibious vessels, will be in the Suez Canal heading towards the Mediterranean. Two US amphibious vessels will be there round about 7 hours from now, going through the Suez Canal on their way to, one assumes, the coast near Libya. We're talking about the problems with regard to those people who've been left behind, those who've tried unsuccessfully so far to get out. Let's hear from Peter Boucard. He's Director of Emergencies at Human Rights Watch, and he's in Benghazi. He told me earlier that migrants from some nations are being ignored in the rush to evacuate Libya.
It's a very tragic scene here at the harbor every day as these huge cruise ships come to pick up nationals. We've seen cruise ships coming for Chinese, for Vietnamese, for Syrians, for Moroccans every day, and Africans as well as some other poor Asians from Bangladesh go every day to try to get on these ships, and they're just refused to get entry on board and go back home to face further violence in the community.
Well, in just a moment, we'll be hearing directly from those African migrant workers who say they've been the target of a number of attacks. And we'll tell you why this very popular German government minister